All right. Well, hi everyone. My name is Amir, and today I'm here with Artin, a close friend and a equity research associate at AlphaSense in the healthcare industry. So without further ado, we're going to jump right in. So in this first phase of the video, I really want Artin to give us a little overview of what he does on a day-to-day basis, where he does it, and again, what does that look like?
Yeah, for sure. So I, like Amir said, work as an equity research associate at AlphaSense, and mainly right now, a lot of what we do is we build financial models. So think about like any company. We probably have a financial model for that company, and there's a lot of companies we do have a financial model for, and there's a lot of them that we don't. So my job is to go look at the companies that we don't have financial models for, and to learn about the business. Look at the important things to consider when building a financial model, and pretty much spend however long it takes to build a financial model to add it to the library of our models.
Okay. And we heard Artin say the word financial model a bit too many times. So
Right.
Okay, I mean I'm not in the field of finance, and if you guys have come across this video, it's in our finance library. So again, tell us a little bit, what is a financial model? Why is that important? Like why does your company make them?
Right. So financial models, pretty much, I mean, you can think of them as an Excel sheet, and then within the Excel sheet, there are, things about how the company makes their money, what they own, what they owe, and it pretty much is a way to quantify what a company is worth. So for example, you have what the company currently owns, right? So we have like all that data. There's a lot of like data inputs into having the current status of the company. And then what you can do is you can, once you have it all in Excel, you can actually forecast, for example, how much the company will make in the future. And then, based on that, there's a lot of analyses that can be done to, get to the value of the company. So it's mainly, used for investors to kind of, estimate and really use numbers and quantify the estimates of how much a company is valued, or how much it should be worth. So, they can make a decision on to invest in the company or to not invest in the company.
And this basically almost answered my second question, but AlphaSense, I mean, Artin's told me a little bit about it. It's a startup. I think it's around $4 billion valuation,
right,
but
yeah.
I'll let Artin tell us a little bit about like.
So AlphaSense, I guess the way that it relates to, my work. So I'll give like AlphaSense a general overview. AlphaSense is pretty much a financial data provider. So, talked about a little bit earlier, think about any company that like, either like Apple, Microsoft, Nvidia, all these big names. We have pretty much, or AlphaSense has like whatever financial data you can think about for the company, it's there. So how much money they make, how much money they own, what they're worth, and so on. So AlphaSense pretty much is a big library that has all this information. And a really cool thing with AlphaSense is that they've really integrated AI and artificial intelligence, and like with the whole revolution that's happening, they've really incorporated it in like a really nice way. That they have a really accurate and like useful LLM. Large language model that it can help when you're looking for certain financial numbers or any data. You get, instead of like going and looking for like all the statements within a company, it's a lot easier. They make it in a way that you can just type and ask the chatbot find this, or what was the income of this company in this year, or like that's very basic, but much more in-depth questions that you can ask, and it's able to pull up great answers. And that's how I guess the major benefit is that for like everyday users, but I guess more like advanced users or like bigger investors or institutional investors, the models that we make, that's probably a little bit more detailed for them, and that's something that they get out of AlphaSense, apart from the big financial data.
Got it. So it's almost like a chat GPT for investors that's trained on specific data that's, I guess,
exactly
organized data.
Exactly.
Not
it's actually
everything.
It's a great way to put it. Yeah. Pretty much exactly that.
And before we move into learning more about, again, Artin's, high school journey and his career path, just again, how long have you been with AlphaSense, and again, how did you get to AlphaSense? Just briefly, and then we'll talk about it more.
So Very briefly, I've been at AlphaSense for about 6, 7 months, and it was actually my first financial job out of school. So, we'll maybe go into this a little bit more detail, but I completed my Master's of Finance, or Master's of Science in Finance from SFU, and then after that, I was able to get a position at AlphaSense as Equity Research Associate, and yeah, it's been a great journey so far, and like kind of all around, coming full circle, ended up being in the healthcare pod, which, I can use a little bit of my knowledge in undergrad to, add value that way as well.
All right. So we got to hear about Artin's current position at AlphaSense, and, he mentioned the healthcare pod that he works in. So many of you may not know this, but Artin actually has a background in the sciences, and he was doing what I was trying to do as a pre-medical student and trying to get into medical school or even dentistry. So I want you to tell us a little bit more about, again, what did you do for undergrad? And obviously we're going to talk a little bit about high school as well, because some of the people that are going to be watching this are going to be in high school. But So what did you do in undergrad? And spoiler, Artin was in the sciences. And then how did that transition into going into finance?
Right. So yeah, I didn't have the conventional path to finance or business or that route. I actually completed my bachelor's degree in molecular biology and biochemistry at SFU. So like Amir said, initially I wanted to either go into medicine or dentistry, mainly because that was out of all the options that was presented earlier on. That's where I found to be like a little bit like, I wanted to go pursue that path. I can give you a little bit of background, but pretty much, it was between engineering, law, or medicine. And so I was like, okay, we'll transition into maybe medicine. And this was back when I didn't know anything about finance, anything about the economy, anything about business. So that's pretty much, that actually all changed in 2020. So 2020, a lot of people know it as, COVID and all that. But what actually happened during the COVID pandemic crisis was, the financial markets crashed pretty heavily. And so that was a lot of, what the news was about. And, of course, people talked about, whatever was happening with COVID and number of infections and so on. But a lot of people were talking about financial markets and the crash. So that really, sparked my curiosity. And I, didn't know anything about finance, anything about the financial markets. So wanted to learn about these things myself. So spent a lot of time, and actually with Amir as well, we learned about financial markets a lot. And so the more I learned, through, articles or, academic papers and also YouTube as well, the more interested I became into the field of finance.
Yeah.
And so pretty much I think it was in year 3, I was like, microbiology is good, molecular biology, microbiology, and medicine is all like really good. I truly do have a passion for that, but I really, really like finance as well. So decided to finish my bachelor's in molecular biology and go and get a master's from finance, Master's of Science in Finance. And so that's again how I ended up going into the field of finance.
And a couple of things just popped into my head, and I think it would be helpful to say for the audience. I mean, and with Artin and with finance, it's a little bit interesting because we actually, at least more for Artin, but a little bit for me, we got to really learn by doing. And that's, in basic terms, just like investing in stocks or following companies, currencies, or even crypto and those things. So that's right. What got us interested into it, and Artin much more, and how he, changed his career. But one of the key things that I think it's really important from everyone to take away from Artin's path, and something that we really want to keep reiterating, is that Artin spent a whole undergrad, so that's 4 years, and a lot of people here are trying to choose their majors and figure out what they're going into. You did the 4 years, and you transitioned, so it shows that you are able to transition to vastly different things, but it also shows how important. And I don't want to boast, but how important, like what we're trying to do is, and what the point of this curriculum is, to really get you guys to expose to, again, different individuals like Artin, different careers, different university majors and different jobs, so that you really can, make as educated as a guess of possible of what you should pursue and where to go. And so that's one thing, but the comforting thing is that even if you decide to go somewhere, you still can switch, and whether that's through a master's or changing your major, or even using your major in a different field. I mean, those are all things that we've seen with our friends and even people you probably work with.
Yeah, 100%. And just one other thing to add, forgot to mention the other part of like the investing part of, why I went into finance as well. And that was a big part of it. So I think if you're watching this and you're a little bit unsure about what career you want to go into, look at the hobbies that you're doing. What do you enjoy doing, or try to explore different hobbies. So personally, I didn't know anything about finance or investing or the financial markets or the economy, and so maybe if I learned about these things a little bit earlier, the curiosity would have come a little bit earlier, and maybe could have made a better decision of choosing an undergrad.
Yeah.
But I think, don't put too much pressure on yourself, and, just, I think living your life the way it is and just trying different things, that'll expose you to, different hobbies and such. So, yeah.
And we've got to see that with a lot of friends. Again, if there's, people that are into sports or weight training, there's physiotherapy, there's kinesiology, there's people that are into like video games, or again, robotics, it's engineering, computer science, animations. I mean, again, that's a really good point. Again, see what you like. So for me, I've always liked more health and the human body, anatomy, physiology. So that's more why I'm interested in medicine. So that's cool. Again, I want to get back a little bit to the healthcare pod and AlphaSense. So you did your bachelor's, 4 years. Then you did the master's, I think it was 16 months.
Right.
Give me a little bit more about the master's. What was that like? And then finding the job and now being at AlphaSense.
Right, yeah. So the master's, let's see, what can I talk about here? So it was actually so like Amir said, 16 months, it was fairly compact, and we had pretty much a course per month. So learned a lot during the master's, and especially for me, it was pretty difficult because I had no academic background in finance. And so learning like all these courses that were all new to me. So that was definitely challenging. And the one good thing, I guess, with, excuse me, I think to cut that somehow.
That's okay.
But, the one good thing, with the Masters of Finance at SFU is that there's something called the CS Fund. So the Student Investment Advisory Services Fund is where, kind of like co-op, kind of like internships, you get to apply your knowledge that you're learning in school, in the real world. So we have this fund. It was at the time that we, inherited the fund, it was about $25 million. And, we made investments, and pretty much students get to, either pitch stocks or basically manage the fund, so choose what investments we want to hold in the fund. Mm-hmm. And we pretty much have 1 year, and we see how the performance was. And, it's pretty much you're trying to choose funds based on what you're learning in school. So it's a great, again, like co-op and internships. It's a great way to apply your knowledge in real life. Yeah.
And, that's really insightful stuff. And now finding the job part, because, right. We talked about this with Artin, and again, for a lot of high school students, they might not know, mm-hmm. Or they might, but if there's older people in the audience and people that are looking for jobs now, right. We've talked about how the job market's a little bit rough right now. Right, so what was that like, going through that and getting a job?
Yeah, so specifically in finance, the employment, like the market for finding employment is pretty cyclical. So right now the economy is like not in a great place. It's a little bit, there's a slowdown, so that affects how companies are hiring for like either financial analysts or equity research associates, like, and so on. So definitely was pretty difficult to finding a job, especially with someone like me that didn't have any professional background. I didn't have co-op, didn't have internships. The one good thing I had was the CS program that I talked about earlier. Mm. But, a lot of that's, if you want to, again, luckily I was able to land this job, but if you want to, make your chances of landing a job even higher, then co-op and internships are, the way to go. That's how you, again, the most important thing in a career in either like both finance and business is like work experience. So the earlier you start, the better it's going to be for your future. Mm-hmm. So, and again, internships and co-ops really do help with that.
And just for the audience, how many jobs did you apply for to, land a job or
Yeah,
land some interviews? Like, what was
honestly,
that numbers like?
yeah, on top of my head, I think at least 100 jobs, like over maybe 4 or 5 months. So yeah, it honestly is like a full-time job of and of itself. Just, applying to jobs, doing interviews. So yeah, it was a lot, but you get better at it. You get better with interviews. You get, you improve your resume, so you get better at it as time goes on. But I think for me, my main disadvantage was not having like any co-op experience or internships. I know a lot of people, like in my master's, they actually had work experience even before doing the master's, so that really helped them land a job earlier and be more competitive in the job market. But yeah.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing again, it's again getting into in the workforce as early as possible, getting the experiences, and also again keep on trying and improving yourself, whether that's with improving interviews, improving the resume, and again just continuously reaching out. And I remember, Artin's a close friend, and we always talk. He was doing everything. Whether it's connecting with people, getting people through family to potentially find jobs. That seems to be the case for most of the people I've talked to.
So one other thing, yeah, that's actually another point I forgot to mention. Your network is also very important for finding a job. A lot of jobs in finance or just in general the business sector are filled through like either referrals or if someone knows someone, and that's mostly because there's a lot of competition, a lot of applications. So most of the time, if the employer has some sort of previous knowledge or they know how this person is like, if they're referred by someone that works at the current company, there is that like, okay, we trust this, there is some trust to it. So it just makes the employer's job a little bit easier. So, for even when you're in high school, connecting with people that, are equity research analysts or, have the jobs that you want, it's gonna, help. They're going to know you, so maybe down the line you can be great friends with them, and when it's time to get a job, your friend works at this company and they trust you, you're a good person, so they can refer you, and you learn about what that person is doing, right? So I can share a little bit, I did share a little bit about what I do as an equity research associate, but it's just like any other job, for I don't know, dentistry, even medicine, shadowing people or learning about what that person is doing is going to add to your knowledge as well.
Yeah, or even like getting into research, getting into a lab,
exactly,
all those things. So again, we talked a lot about the career stuff and big picture things. I want to go back to high school now, because again, we are creating these videos primarily for high school students, but for again a general audience. So where did you go to high school? I guess. Yeah, what was that like? What did you like during high school? Yeah, let's go from there.
Yeah, so high school, I graduated from Carson, and I spent so Carson Graham, spent 5 years there. The entire my high school was at Carson, and yeah, high school was really good for me. Friends, and just I think the environment is a lot different. We both come from Iran, so getting like the switch, like knowing how school is in Iran, and then coming here and then figuring out how like school is, even like how it looks. We have lockers and all these things that that's not the case in other countries. So that was a great it's a great thing to notice, and I guess it was very good. The only maybe the downside of like for me specifically was not being exposed to many different careers or just many different fields, and that ended up hurting me down the line, which maybe it took me a little bit longer to get in the workforce and figure out what I really wanted to do. But I think it was good. We had great teachers, and if you are thinking about medicine, law, or engineering, I think high school really gives you like a broad overview of what the different topics that you're like learning about in school. It really gives you an idea of maybe which one you want to go to.
Yeah, and Artin did the IB program.
That's right.
So I guess tell us a little bit about the IB program, because I didn't do the IB. I went to Handsworth, and we both graduated in 2019.
Yeah.
I actually probably shouldn't have said that, because now the people watching are, I think, we're too old to listen to. And it's crazy that I have to say we're too old, but for people who in high school, I think we might be too old. But so IB, and what were your interests? So I don't know, was it sciences? Did you like math? Did you like physics? What was that like?
Yeah, so it's quite different actually now versus when I was in high school, I guess. But yeah, I did do the IB program. So it's for those that don't know, a 2-year program. So in grade 11 and 12, and my courses were math, biology, chemistry, English, Spanish, and geography. And higher level courses were English, biology, and chemistry. And, actually in high school, I was really into the sciences, and, probably the reason why I wanted to go into medicine, and not actually too much in math, but that's kind of flipped around a little bit, which, goes to show your interest can change over time. Now I think I'm like a lot more interested in the maths and just a lot of more quantitative stuff versus in high school, maybe a little bit more in the sciences. But yeah, I think it was definitely challenging. But I think as I've, grown up a little bit, I think you need to challenge yourself, early on, because then your entire life is going to be probably challenging as, you want to grow, progress in your career. So the earlier you are exposed to maybe more challenges, that, you get used to it, and, the hard work and everything is, built into you. So that could be definitely a benefit of, doing either the IB program or, just really locking in high school and yeah, doing your best.
And, two things just popped into my head. First thing, what Artin said, again, your interests might change. And so what does that mean? So, to me, that means like if, for me, I was a super science student. And I'm like, why do I care about social studies? I never cared about social studies. But now Artin knows we both, we have a world map behind us. Why is that? Because again, we're interested. We become, I like geography, history, philosophy, political science. These are like things that I could never imagine myself liking, but I'm actually liking now.
Exactly.
So it's crazy. And again, if you think you're a science student, don't use that label to limit yourself in, participating in other topics like social studies, because I think that's what I might have done.
Yeah, especially when you move from high school to university, because, thinking back at it again, high school is fairly limited in terms of like course selection and how many like fields you're exposed to. But when you go into university, there's, so much out there that you're like, oh, I didn't know that this even existed. So, another tip there, I guess, would be to, when you go into university, if you do go into university, really take the opportunity to explore all the different fields, get educated about the different fields, and that'll definitely help you make a more informed decision down the road.
Yeah. No, that's fascinating. We could keep going on and on about this. So Artin mentioned he came from Iran. Of course, I also came from Iran. We're both Persian. So again, one of the aspects of some of the videos we're going to be creating is to really cater some of our content for newcomer students. That's one of our goals, because we are newcomers ourselves, and we want to provide some some tips, some resources, again, how to really help with that transition. So I guess give us a quick background again. What was it like for you being a newcomer? And I know for Artin, you came earlier, in elementary school, which is similar to me. So what was that like? And then we'll go from there.
Yeah, I think, let's see, I moved to Canada in grade 4, so halfway actually between 4 and 5. So half of grade 4 I was in Iran, and then the latter half I was in Canada. And I think what's really common for people, especially like immigrant children, to feel is, not having a sense of belonging, or, having difficulty finding friends, speaking the language. These are all very common things that a lot of people experience. So, if you are watching this and you're an immigrant and, you felt that's, completely normal. And I guess, I think what happened, with me is, just finding friends. And, it's a lot easier said than done. But, that helps with your language as well, right? So like, at home, or, if you're only speaking Farsi, or the language that like, that you speak at home, you're going to have a hard time learning the English language. And, even if you're friends, even like I remember me and Amir, we're both from Iran, so we both can speak Persian fluently. However, we started talking a lot in English, which I think definitely helped us, learn the language a little bit faster. So that's one aspect of it as well. And then, just finding your friends. I think like, me and Amir, we were really interested in basketball, and I think that's initially how we got to be friends. But, again, it goes to your, like, what you're passionate about, what your interests are. You'll find friends that way as well. So if that's something you're having difficulty with, that could help as well. And I think, yeah, just as an immigrant, like to an extent, you're starting a new life, especially like, me and Amir, we were in elementary school, but I can imagine if you're in high school, you already have a lot of friends, in your, and for us, it would be Iran, but, whatever country you immigrated from. So it's really hard to, make the jump at a, not younger, but older age. So that can definitely be hard, but again, like the same basic rules apply that, it's finding friends, speaking the language, constantly to get better at English. And yeah, I think that's, time goes on and, things end up working out. So I think, yeah.
Yeah, and again, one of the goals is going to be like, we're going to have more and more people come on, and we're going to have some people who, who came to Canada at a, older age. So again, older, like 12, I came here when I was 12, but people that came like 16, 17. Yeah. And again, there's, again, we'll get to talk a little bit more about the technical details in some of our other videos. But for example, if someone comes in grade 10, they might need to do some extra things for English requirements. We know about that. Like, again, whether you have to do an IELTS test or whether you need to, again, different requirements for newcomers. And again, that's going to be some of the goals for our videos. Again, before we leave off, again, I guess that was pretty much everything, but any other pieces of advice for newcomers? And again, one thing that comes to my head is potentially like mentorship, again, reaching out to us, or again, using the material that we're going to, share through our toolkits and some of other resources.
Yeah, exactly. I think, just to finish it off, I think what you can, Amir mentioned a really good thing about mentorships, and kind of alluded to that a little bit earlier of if there's a career you're interested in, going and finding someone that's doing that job, that is a form of mentorship. So mentorships like that are like it's very beneficial. So if someone's doing what you want to do, they've gone through what probably you will go through, so they can give you a lot of advice on handle whatever comes with that profession. And what to expect, what the job is like, and so on. So that's definitely a big part. And then I guess for a little bit more immigrant specific, I think the best you can do is find good people and be friends with them. Again, it's a lot easier said than done, but good people find each other. So never doubt that. And yeah.
And this is a little bit off topic, but again, I think, we come from the Middle East, and again, there's cultural differences as well. And I think one thing that just came into my head and I wanted to talk about it is like, again, sometimes people's values are different, beliefs are different, culture are different. And I think, sometimes we come here and we would like to assimilate, but again, it's also just being aware of both worlds and, kind of not being embarrassed of who you are. Mm-hmm. Maybe, that's something, especially when you're younger, it's harder. I think we're much more confident in what we believe or what our cultures are and those things. So that's kind of, again, if it can help, alleviate some, again, stress around that. Again, I think being comfortable around who you are and what your culture is also okay and good. All right. So now we got to learn a lot about Artin, and of course, I want to keep going on and about talking, but again, we're going to keep it short. So I guess tell us a little bit about, again, so we got to learn what you've been doing and what you've learned and what you've studied, but what are the next steps? What is the future going to look like? Mm-hmm. And, what are you learning now? What are you trying to learn now? What are the goals?
Yeah. So, it's a hard question to answer, but, there's some things I definitely do know and some things I don't. But I definitely want to stay in this field. Like, I've found something I'm passionate about. So finance and equity research, definitely want to stay in this field and, grow as, grow in either the role I'm in right now or other roles, and just, you know, become better at my job, and also learn, like, you know, more about finance and companies and equity research in general. So, you know, one thing I know I'm gonna be doing is getting the CFA certificate.
Right.
So that's, you know, we talked about this a little bit in the other videos, but it's a certificate pretty much that, you know, is really good to have as a equity research, someone in the equity research field. So that'll help me, you know, get a little bit more financial knowledge. And, you know, beyond that, it's, you know, pretty hard to say exactly where you want to go, but I think probably just staying in this field and improving is in it as well.
No, that's a great point. And you know what I'm learning now from all my friends, again, you, Parsa and others, it's really, you know, when you get into a field, it's a lot about specializing, becoming stronger, learning a lot more skills, and really continuing to hone in on that one skill. And, you know, people who have probably watched some of the other videos, I mean, that gets to the whole idea of a career. And, you know, you're really building towards this one, you're in this one path, in this one field, and going through and at it. So I guess that brings us to the end of the video. I want to thank again for Artin coming on here and talking about finance, and hopefully again this was helpful to you guys, and hopefully you got to take away some stuff, and, you know, hopefully it was helpful. I mean, that's all I can really say. You know, anything else you want to say?
Thank you for having me, and yeah, wish you guys the best. Thank you for watching.